Okay, let's begin. Welcome to today's Praying Alive, Standing Before God class. Sylvan Amanda is generously sponsored today in memory of her beloved and adored mother, Fortune Mazal Bat Henrietta, Aleh Shalom, and an appreciation of Rabbi Faria for his guidance, his amazing sense of humor, and enormous spiritual contribution to our lives. Just to be clear, I didn't write that myself. I always feel like I need to tell people, thank you very much, Silvana. We really appreciate it. And it should be Ilui Nishama for your dear mother, Be'ezrat Hashem. Also, Marilyn Plitman, in loving memory, and Leilui Nishmat, her mother, Sarah Nina Bat Julie, Aleh Shalom for her Askara. Was that today? It was last week. I wasn't here. Okay, so I'm glad we got it in. I could not get a sound out last week. Okay, let's go. So we are up to Mechalkel, Chaim, Bchesed, Mechayeh, metim, brachamim, rabim. These words, maybe it's a little bit apropos, especially for two women who are donating and dedicating the class in memory of their mothers. The pasuk, the tefillah says, Mechalkel, Chaim, Bchesed, that God sustains life, Bchesed, with kindness. Mechayeh, metim, brachamim, rabim. He revives the dead with great mercy. So this theme of reviving from the dead is a cornerstone of this blessing. We've spoken a lot about it in different ways. What does it mean that God revives the dead? We talked about it last week and 2 weeks ago. But today we see that expression brought here yet again. Mechalkel Chaim Bchesed, God sustains life with kindness, and He revives and brings the dead back to life, right? With brachamim rabim, with great mercy. So the first question we have to ask is, why are we using different expressions, different adjectives for the way God brings life back from death and for the way God sustains life? You might imagine that those two things are both done with kindness. Or you'd imagine that both of those things are done with great brachamim, with great mercy. So what is the idea? What's being communicated to us in these two words? So the first thing I want to talk about is the idea that kindness and strength, as we've discussed earlier, are not contradictory ideas when one is experiencing them in their acted out phases. So let me give you an example. Strength and kindness, one might think, are opposites in terms of the midah. But as an example, when we talk about HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the greater God's strength, the greater the kindness experienced. So let me try and explain what that looks like. If someone, as an example, has a lot of power in themselves, they're very strong. So what they might need from God is very little kindness, correct? The less the person is capable of lifting themselves, which means the stronger God has to be, the greater the kindness experienced is. So as an example, in the world with human beings, oftentimes people who are weak or are vulnerable, can't stand up for themselves, who don't have a background, or they don't have someone who's standing behind them, that person might feel, or people might decide to take advantage of them, right? Simply because they are weak. The weaker the person is, the more strength is required to restrain oneself from taking advantage of that weakness. What is a person at their weakest point? When they are dead. So therefore, the gvura that is required for Techiyat metim is the highest form of gvura. Like that's what we said earlier. Ata gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh metim ata Rav le'oshia. You are eternally mighty. Why? Because you revive the dead. Okay. Now, since that's the case, so the greatest gvura, the greatest expression of God's strength, results in the maximum amount of His kindness. What that helps us understand is these two expressions of kindness and mercy here in a person's life. So let's try and understand what these two concepts reflect. And we've discussed this before, but let's revisit the idea. Kindness and mercy, unlike kindness and strength, are usually used together, right? A person is very kind, they had a lot of mercy, that's what we think. But actually, they're fundamentally different. Because mercy is something that needs to be, it can only be, reactive, right? You can have mercy on someone who's sick, someone who's weak, someone who's poor, someone who's disadvantaged. If there is no person, there is no mercy. Is that clear? So when we talk about God creating the world, could God have created the world with mercy? No, there is no one there. There is no feeling of mercy to be drawn out because there are no people. Kindness, on the other hand, can be proactive. So as an example, you could wake up in the morning feeling like, I want to help someone today. You haven't met the need yet. You haven't been given that feeling of mercy that bubbles up when you see someone who's so distraught. I don't know if I'm sure everyone saw the terrible news of this past Shabbat. You can't breathe. You see the person, you just want to help. Right? It's to lose a wife, to lose 2 children in a split second, an accident on Shabbat morning, run over by a car. It's horrible. You look at this person and bubbling up inside of you, you don't even know them, is this unbelievable mercy. You feel so bad for someone. Now, imagine no one had told you that story. Could you wake up in the morning just feeling bad for someone when I will discover how much pain they will be in? No. Mercy is by definition a reactive feeling. Now, since that's the case, let's try and understand what this looks like in the sustaining life versus reviving the dead conundrum. Okay? When someone is alive and they need something, I can look at that person and feel a sense of mercy towards them. Correct? When someone is already dead, the mercy actually is no longer focused on the people. The mercy actually shifts to the people who are living, who are now suffering with the loss of those people. Okay? So the tefillah over here is telling us that when God looks down at all living beings, every single one of us, He wants to help us, and His desire to help us comes from Bchesed, from kindness. It's proactive. However, when it comes to reviving the dead, God does it with great mercy, but not with kindness. And I want to share something with you that's very powerful. You see, when the time comes and Mashiach arrives and the people are brought back to life, Judaism teaches that not everyone merits to have this great opportunity to be brought back in the time of the Messiah. A person needs to earn the right to be able to be brought back. Listen carefully. That means that Tchiyat metim is not happening with Bchesed. Why? Because if it was happening with kindness, a person wouldn't need to merit it. Is that clear? Yeah? Anyone, no matter who you were, no matter what you've done, it wouldn't matter. You have the opportunity to be brought back because God's kindness is not reactive. It's proactive. It's there even if you don't exist. Therefore, for sure, even if you don't deserve it. Since a person needs to earn Tchiyat metim, even if it's just on some small level, maybe I needed to do one mitzvah, maybe I needed to be nice to one person in order to be able to earn that opportunity. Therefore, it's only expressed with regards brachamim rabim, with great mercy. Okay? Now, since that's the case, what we need to start understanding now is what is the kindness that God sustains life with, and how are we, you and I, supposed to relate to this? Because remember, Where are we at? What's the emotion? What's the vibe in this bracha at this point in the Amidah? We are recognizing God's strength. We're in the period of the blessing, which is all about praising Hashem, understanding God's greatness so that we can connect to Him, so that we can have a relationship with Him. Okay? If you had someone in your life that was the best wife you could ever have, the best husband you could ever have, but you just thought that they were a regular person, by definition, you are not having a relationship with them. Because the nature of a relationship is defined by the understanding of that which is precious, which is special about the person you're in a relationship with. If you relate to your husband like a waiter, okay, or someone who writes a check, then maybe you have someone in your life which is helpful to you, but you do not have a husband. You don't have marriage. Is that clear? Yeah. Okay? Yes. So, when we talk about God sustaining our life with kindness, I want to give you the mindset to think about what that actually looks like. This limitless, impossible to earn blessing that comes from Hashem in the sustaining of life. The easiest place to see God sustaining life is when it comes to a baby that's being born. The egg is fertilized in the mother's stomach. Now, when we think of children, we think of the children that we nurture, right? That we bring into the world, that we educate, that we feed. But there is a point in the creation of life where the parents really are completely and utterly powerless. I don't know if anyone has ever experienced this. I hope they haven't. But when a doctor will see a scan of a baby and they'll tell you, I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking at, come back in 3 weeks. And what do you mean 3 weeks? Well, there's nothing that we'll be able to see until that amount of time has passed, until they've reached a certain level of a barometer, until we've seen how the heart can develop, until we've seen if the brain, the spine, the motor, the fingers, and what can you do at that point as a mother? Literally nothing. As a father, literally nothing. You are sitting there in the hands of God, and God is deciding with His Bchesed how or if life will be sustained and what form and caliber of life will be sustained. In that moment, assuming this miracle of life occurs against all odds, this baby is sitting there in the mother's stomach, and it's fascinating because it is straddling two different worlds. What is perfect for the baby 1 second after it's born will kill the baby 1 second before it's born. Think of the idea that essentially a baby before birth is a fish. It can't breathe. If the pipes of breathing are opened 1 second before the baby is born, the baby will drown in amniotic fluid. What happens? So therefore, it has to not breathe, correct? What happens 1 second after birth? If what was designed to keep the baby alive 1 second ago is still in force after the baby is born, the baby will die for lack of oxygen. It's remarkable how the systems need to switch, how the nurturing 1 second ago coming from the umbilical cord 1 second later will shift into the baby knowing and understanding that it needs to get its sustenance, not from here anymore, but from here. Who tells the baby that? How does the baby know to suckle? It's never done that before. Not one time. And seconds after birth, the baby's suck reflex switches on. The baby's processing of nutrients, of food, the stomach, the esophagus, everything is suddenly, it's the craziest switch. It's Chazde Hashem. And what do we do, by the way? As doctors, if the baby doesn't shift, they give the baby a little slap, hoping that it's basically like when you used to whack the TV.
The vending machine.
It's unbelievable. It is unbelievable. Mechalkel Chaim Bchesed means there's nothing the baby could do for itself. There's nothing the parents could do for the baby. And God, in His kindness, is sustaining life, is giving this baby everything it needs, and not only everything it needs, down to the split second that it needs. If you put a baby on its mother's chest, the baby does not know how to crawl, but it will figure out how to move itself towards the source of its nourishment. Who told the baby where to get Uber Eats for lunch? I always love the fact that in Hebrew, a baby is called an Uber. Anyway, it's getting all of its food delivered right to it. Ubar, right? Now, ladies, not only can the baby do nothing to sustain its own life, but what has the baby done in terms of merit to earn that God should save its life? What mitzvah did he do? Nothing. That's the definition of the Bchesed of Hashem. Now what's crazy is, that's a moment where we're able to see how things would work or wouldn't work if God did or didn't do what He needed to do in that split second. But in truth, this reality is a constant reality of the human experience. The more we learn about the body, the more we understand that we don't know. There was a study yesterday of a patient who had some form of situation that happened in the human brain where the brain begins to eat at itself. And it had converted the vast majority of the brain to water. And the brain had become like a paper-thin version of itself. And the person was still capable of thought. It's just flies in the face of everything we understand about neuroscience. But there's many things like this. I don't know if anyone read recently some new information coming out about Alzheimer's and dementia. Of not only being able to stop what was lost, but to be able to regain. I mean, it's just everything that we thought was impossible. How wondrous the human body is. They discovered some form of whatever that a person could put in their hair, instead of dyeing their hair, that it will reactivate. I mean, anyone know why our hair goes white? I mean, nobody's hairs goes white, only mine. But why do our hairs go white? Because eventually the follicles stop being able to produce pigmentation. A white hair is not white, it's just a hair without coloring. So when the hair follicle no longer can produce pigmentation, now you have a white hair. Okay? And they've created something that will allow the hair follicle to again create pigmentation. It's not dyeing hair. Well, you have to pay extra to find out. All right.
Sorry. The study by us, I read it, but I wasn't sure it was true. You see so many things on it.
Everything is true. The only question is implementation. The only question is FDA approval. The only question is, did you bring back the memories and then kill the guy 3 minutes later? That's the question that we're facing, in all these cases. And also, unfortunately, what is now coming out is that half the time these things are being withheld, they're being withheld with specific intent because of interest in the drug companies. It's just, the stuff that you read is just shocking. Anyway, however, that's the idea of Mechalkel Chaim Bchesed. That the sustaining of God, when God sustains life, it's done without anyone deserving it, without anyone doing something for their own sake. You have diabetics who are constantly reaching for another piece of baklava, it's poison for them, but the body is figuring out how to self-regulate. It's unbelievable. Just understanding how high blood sugar works and insulin spikes and the change of food into glucose, it's just mind-blowing. You are a walking factory. Literally, if we were to turn a human being into the actual broken down pieces of what it is, an ocular factory, an olfactory factory, right? Just a factory designed to be able to discern the different tastes. The amount of what you would need in order to be able to have, like the robotics companies that we would need in order to just recreate the simple opening and closing of fingers. We are like cities worth of factories. And no matter how overweight you feel, you're still a very condensed version of everything that's going on inside of you. It's just unbelievable. This is the unmitigated, unending chesed of Hashem in sustaining life. So, let's stop for 1 second and try a very simple exercise. Close your eyes, and I want you to repeat after me, Mechalkel, Chaim, Bchesed. God, you sustain life with kindness. Start right at the bottom of your tippy toes and wriggle your toes on your feet. It's interesting. Even as you're wriggling the toes on your feet, your brain is sending a message down your spine. Instant, by the way. There's no lag like on your computer or on your phone. Instantly, your toes are wiggling. But anyone else notice something while your toes are wiggling? The whole fascia of the bottom of your foot is contracting, moving. Aren't you feeling some movement in your heel as you wriggle your toes? Yeah, you feeling that?
Yeah.
The interconnectedness, and how in order to move your little toe, your heel and the fascia on the bottom of your foot needs to support that. Your other toes are moving in tandem to be able to maintain stability so that that toe can move and you don't fall over. Now let it feel, move up. You can use your fingers if you find it hard, right? Just take your foot and just flex it at your heel. Move your ankle and your heel up and down. Do you feel the bang of your heel on the floor? Those are nerve endings in your heel. Your heel is dead skin, but still there's enough nerve endings for you to be able to feel the impact. If you hit harder, your nerves tell you that was more force. Every part of your body is alive. Sorry to say this, ladies. You're feeling up your leg. Squeeze your calves, okay? Feel it. Understand that not only is the muscle there alive and twitching, listening and responding to the voices coming from your brain, but even on the skin surface itself, you can feel where your fingers are as you move them up your calf. On your actual skin, there are hair follicles, and you have hair that's growing there. It's just remarkable. Every part of you is alive. Get to your knees, put your hands on your knees and move your legs forward and back. Understand that just as this microphone has this little mechanism that lets it turn and rotate, your feet and your ankles are exactly the same. There's a socket, and inside that socket is your leg bone, allowing for complete movement. But by the way, your knee is not just fixed, it's a floating kneecap, held in place by the muscles, by the tendons, by the sinews, to allow for complete range of motion, or for some people, not so complete. but complete range of motion so that your legs can move. And it doesn't only rotate forward and back. Put your leg on top of your other leg, rotate it outwards. Your knee operates in all different directions, allowing for complete fluid motion. You know what's inside? Not titanium, not for some of us, not plastic, bone and meat. That's what's happening underneath. Do you feel the chesed of Hashem in every part of your body? Are you able to sit? Are you able to stand, straighten up your back, move forward, back? To feel that every part of my body is chesed. Even my hair. Can you feel that someone is touching your hair? Touch your hair for a minute. It's unbelievable. Now, sometimes we wonder why Hashem put hair in various places. But even the hair in a person's nose, designed to be a filter, to protect the sinus from dust in the outside atmosphere. Hairs inside your ear, not so that you're hairy, but that you can hear. It's just the most incredible thing. This is what we talk about when we say Mechalkel, Chaim, Bchesed. Not only does God give, but God gives in the most powerful way. Let's take a look at the word Mechalkel. Now that your eyes are closed, open your eyes. Even if your eyesight is not clear, even if your eyesight needs glasses, can you notice the difference between light and dark? Are there any colors? It's remarkable. You know what's amazing? Just go like this with your hand and move it further away and bring it further close. Your eyes, without you telling them what to do, are automatically focusing and refocusing. On a camera, you need to change the autofocus at different focal lengths. What's wild is that your eyes also operate in tandem. You don't see two hands with two screens, you see one hand. Your brain figures out how to take two different visual streams, two completely different cameras, and blend them seamlessly into one image. This is the chesed of Hashem. It's unbelievable. You can smell. You can smell. I mean, it doesn't matter whether the smell is a good smell or not. I don't know who you're sitting next to. But that is the capability that you have. If you can smell someone's perfume who's sitting next to you, or deodorant, hopefully, your brain is automatically taking that smell and pairing it and comparing it against all other smells it has ever smelled in your history and saying, where have I smelled this before? What is this? It's just unbelievable. I mean, people, we're just not aware of how insane it is that our bodies should operate. Even at some limited level, even if we're not completely healthy. My throat is not completely healthy. I still have a little bit of a cold. But I am a medical miracle. All of us are. With trillions of dollars, go look at the best efforts that they have with space-age technology. Look at the best efforts they have at creating a robot that's like a human. They are so far away. And how are you made? Parents got married, birds and the bees, and out of that came the most sophisticated technology that we have in our entire universe, or at least our observed universe. Just understand that. The word Mechalkel, which means to sustain, actually has the word kol in it twice. Hashem gives with kindness, He sustains life, but He doesn't only give life everything, He gives us everything in everything. So, raise your hand if you remember black and white TV. Remember black and white TV? Right? Remember the honeymooners?
You don't.
Yes, I do.
How you did?
Yeah. 9. I Love Lucy, you remember, yeah? That was before TV was so popular. Do you remember shows on the radio? Anyone here old enough for that? Anyone here remember the show, the radio show called The Shadow? The Shadow knows. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts and minds of men? The Shadow knows. That's back in the day. Right? It's unbelievable. Before the 60s. Yeah, I know a lot of things.
You've been here before.
Exactly, many times.
Maybe you.
Now, ladies, kol means, well, you know what life looks like in black and white if you watched black and white television. For God's purposes, the world doesn't need to be in color. Why did He give that to us? Kol Bchesed. There are an infinite number of combinations of food. If you watch a cooking channel, or you love going through cookbooks, different styles, different cultures, different flavors, sharp, spicy, savory, unbelievable. Do you know that cows just eat grass? I mean, we like to think that we're much more sophisticated than a cow. Maybe we are, slightly. But by and large, muscles, bones, God could have made us eating grass. Imagine that. Most of the animals, right, in science, in biology, are surviving on one primary food. You know, Jews too, sushi. But other than that, right? Mechalkel Chaim Bchesed means that God didn't only give us everything, He gave us everything within everything. And what's interesting as well is that everything in everything is not only when things are good, it's also when things aren't so good. Like imagine someone's going through something very difficult. But imagine that person, that somebody had a brother who was Down syndrome. Tish. That brother has no idea what he's going through. He has no idea that they have no money. He has no idea that they have no prospects. He has just no idea. Any one of us would choose to not understand our own existence, even if our own existence was painful. You see, there's a Mechalkel even in our worst day. So if God is giving us everything within everything, why doesn't it feel that way always? So I want to share with you a beautiful Gemara, and this is a very deep idea. Gemara is in Masechet Sanhedrin, page 90. It starts on page 90, Amud Aleph. The Gemara relates a conversation, get ready for this, between Rabbi Meir and, anyone can guess? Rabbi Yehuda, that's a good guess. Who else? Who else you think Rabbi Meir would be having a conversation with in the Gemara? Rabbi Akiva, good. Yossi, beautiful. Amazing. You guys are doing well. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. The Gemara says Rabbi Meir had a conversation with Queen Cleopatra. People are like, oh, that's what it's in the Gemara, that one? Which Gemara is that? Masechet TMZ. So listen to the tea that Queen Cleopatra and Rabbi Meir are sharing. She asked him, During the time of Tchiyat metim, when the dead are brought back to life, are they going to be brought back clothed or naked? This is a question. What's fascinating is that we actually have recorded other conversations on the same page of great Tanaim, that the conversation is happening between them and the Roman emperors. And the Roman emperor's daughter is in the room, and she says to the rabbi, don't bother answering my father's question, I can answer it on your behalf. And she answers what the Gemara records her answer. It's fascinating. Okay, it's in Sanhedrin, and on page, that's already by page 90, Amud Bet or 91. Okay? Answers Rabbi Meir. In the time of Tchiyat metim, the person's body is not going to come back naked, it's going to come back clothed. And what is his proof? His proof is, he says, from a grain of wheat. A grain of wheat is where a person puts a seed into the ground, and that seed then comes out clothed. It has the chaff, it has, right, the leaf around, everything has around it. So if you put a seed in the ground naked and it will come out clothed, how much more so that a body that was put into the ground with shrouds, with clothes, is going to come out of the ground clothed. This was what Rabbi Meir answers her. The question is, what is really being expressed here? What is this conversation really about? Well, the Gemara tells us on the next page, Resh Lakish asked the question. K'tiv, it says in the pasuk, Bam iver v'piseach hara v'yoledet yachdav, that when the dead come back to life, in the end of time, there will be the iver and the piseach, the mute and the blind, will be brought back with the pregnant. V'yoledet yachdav. Uchtiv, but also the pasuk says, Az yidaleg ke'ayal piseach v'taron lashon ilem. At that time, will this person who is disabled will be able to jump and skip like a goat. V'taron lashon ilem, and the mouth of the one that is mute will be able to sing. Ki nifkeu b'midbar mayim u'nehalim ba'arava. When the desert is split open with streams of water, u'nehalim ba'arava. Haketzad asks Resh Lakish, I don't understand. Are people going to be brought back deformed, disabled as they were when they were buried? Or will the mute be able to speak? Will someone who's disabled be able to run? The Gemara answers, Haketzad omdim b'muman, they are revived with their mum, umitrapi'in, and they are immediately healed, cured. That's what the Gemara says. So the question is, if someone was sick in this lifetime, they had polio, they had cancer, they had amputation, they had whatever. The person comes back at the end of time, is that how they come back? And the answer is, Resh Lakish is answering, that the person will be brought back in their sickness, in their deformed, so to speak, way, and then immediately given complete health. The body in its most perfect state. I always think to myself that, we think that when the time comes, we'll have the chance to be able to see our grandparents again. You're not going to recognize your grandparents. They're going to be this young, dashing man that's going to be your grandpa.
What is Rish Lakish?
Rish Lakish is his name. Okay?
But how can if there's only a certain amount of souls, and the souls are regenerated?
Good question. We discussed this last week, or 2 weeks ago. The answer is that even though a person, their soul comes again to this world, you give an entirely new life to that soul. So there are, imagine like on Google Drive, where you have a document and then you change it, and then there's a second version, and then there's a third version, and you can go to the side and choose any one of those versions, and each one of them is a standalone document. The neshama, it gets its source, so to speak, from a previous neshama. But the blank copy is its own soul, with its own choices, with its own life. And that is the complete neshama that you're experiencing in your life. All right? So the question is, what is the Gemara telling us over here? Why is it communicating that they come clothing, they come back clothed, they're healed, they're brought back sick, and then they're fixed? If Hashem is going to fix it, why not bring it back fixed? Especially, people from so long ago, it's a complete recreation. Now, again, people could not understand, how could such a thing happen? The body is completely deteriorated. Today we understand that with one strand of hair, with the tiniest fraction of DNA, we could technically regrow the person as an exact replica at the height of their strength. Now we understand it. So if God was going to fix them anyway, why not bring them back fixed?
And people with Down syndrome also
Be brought back in their not incomplete stage, incomplete form, and then brought to complete health. And then brought to complete health. Okay? So the question is why? What is going on here? Why? Not only Jews, Jews that have deserved it.
Yeah, I'm saying it doesn't apply to the rest of the world.
Anyone that wants to join can join, but only when the membership is open.
For everybody?
No.
No, it's the Jews.
Yes, and not all Jews either. Yes.
Why did we put in the mix of the disabled, you were saying a pregnant woman?
It's a good question. That's a good question. It's again for the same concept, that someone should be brought back in a certain state and then reinstated to complete health. I'm imagining that the point of that was, unfortunately, we saw this in October 7th, pregnant women that were killed. There are two bodies there that need to be brought back. How are they brought back? Are they brought back as separate souls, the baby and the mother? No, they're brought back as they were in that moment, and then the healing process is brought, to fruition. So the question is why? And what's the connection between these 2 points? And in this, I think, is a fascinating idea for all of us to be able to think about ourselves, our life, our experiences, this world. When you talk about the body being perfect, what does that remind you of? Huh? The Greeks, excellent. In Greek mythology, in the Greek idealizing of human perfection, I'd imagine you bring back a big rabbi with his big long white beard, he's hunched over, he's got his Gemara. That's beautiful, that's perfect. We also believe that he needs a six-pack? Right? What is that? Doesn't sound very Jewish. So what is this idea of the body in its strongest possible iteration? What is that idea? What does that represent? And the concept is really, really beautiful. What was the mistake that the Greeks made? Chachamim say on the pasuk in the Torah, where does Greece come from? Greece comes from one of the sons of Noach. Which one of the sons of Noach? Yefet. Yaft Elohim leyefet, says the pasuk. God gave beauty to Yefet. Right?
Yafeh come from that word?
Yavan, you mean?
No, Yafeh.
Yeah. It doesn't come from that word. It's the word Yafeh is expressed in that word. The root word is Yafeh, okay, or Yofi, right? So Yaft Elohim leyefet means God gave unbelievable beauty to the Greeks. It's funny, we call it a Greek goddess or a Greek. That's fascinating. But what's the problem? Is the end of the sentence. V'yishkon be'ahol Hashem. and that beauty will dwell in the tents of Shem. Who comes from Shem? We do. That's what anti-Semites. We are Semites because we come from Shem. That's where Semites comes from, okay? Now, listen to this. God gave unbelievable beauty to the Greeks. It doesn't mean, I saw you saying nose. I love how, that's, I feel like the pot calling the kettle black. It's like Jews finding fault with Greek noses is, it's got to be some irony there. But the point here is, we're not referring only to the perfection of the Greek body. We're not referring. They were obsessed with perfection in the body. Their statues were always done in the nude to illustrate the perfection of the body. The Olympics were done with no clothing on. It was a celebration of that. In fact, the temples were built and statues were made to human beings in the temples. There was a worshiping of the perfect aesthetic. They developed science and mathematics and philosophy. That was all the beauty of Yavan, of Greece. But seen through the eyes of God, the beauty of that would have been when it dwelled in the tent of Shem, in the tent of Torah, in the tent of spirituality. The purpose of seeing and understanding the profundity that there is in science was for men to be able to understand God's fingerprint. The purpose of a perfectly functioning human body was so that you could use that strength not to vanquish an enemy, but to help out a friend. So this understanding of medicine, of mathematics, was to build a world that was better, not to conquer a world. So when God made this beauty, what was it for? Not for itself. It was to act in service of a higher purpose. So when we think of the body, we think of the body as being something physical and the soul being something spiritual. Because to a soul, a body looks physical. But actually, the body is not physical at all. It's only when we've used our body in the most physical of ways that the body becomes a function of our physicality. So we think eating, enjoying food, enjoying the pleasures of the flesh, that's a physical thing. But actually, when the body is used correctly, the body is an interface for your soul, for your spiritual self, to interact with all of the spirituality that is here in this world. So as an example, if I see a woman who's very beautiful and I fall in love and she thinks I'm not that bad, you think that that's a physical connection, and it is, but it allows for the inner dimension of the human being, the spiritual self, to connect with another soul. That is what marriage is. Okay, the highest form of connection, but it's also what friendship is. You might have noticed her across the room, because she's very striking, but then you strike up a conversation and you find out that she's kind and she's nice and she's giving and she's wonderful, and now you become best friends. What has allowed you to connect is not how big or small her nose is, or what color her eyes are. Maybe that just grabbed your attention, that got your body to notice another body. But ultimately, the highest form of connection is when our spiritual insides are communicating with someone else's spiritual insides. We can't do that in this world without the vehicle called the guf, called the body. They tell a story about a Hasidic Rebbe who's sitting at his table and he takes out an apple and he says, Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz, and he takes a bite. And a student comes forward and he says, Rebbe, I don't understand what's the difference between you and I. You make a blessing on an apple and I make a blessing on an apple. Why is everyone lining up here? What makes you so different than me? And the Rebbe smiles at his student and he says, you make a blessing so you could eat the apple, and I eat the apple so that I can make the blessing. When we interact with an apple in order to make a blessing, what is the apple? Is it a physical thing or a spiritual thing? When we are engaged in a marriage to take from our partners, what is it? It's a physical thing. When we are engaged in a marriage to give to our partner, what is it? It is a spiritual thing. Who decides if your marriage is physical or spiritual? You do. Who decides if your world is a physical or spiritual world? You do. Now we look back at our prayer with new, magnificent eyes. God sustains life with kindness, and He brings back the dead with great mercy. Our entire world, not just our body, is clothing for the soul, but our entire world is clothing for its soul. Let's try and understand what that means. You know, the clothing of a person, says the Talmud, is their honor. And we dress, and that tells people how we see ourselves. They tell a story about Rav Yerucham when he was living in Shanghai. You know, the image of a Rosh Yeshiva, of a very, holy man, was one of a man dressed with his hat and his cloak and his tie. And that was how they dressed in Russia. And then, to save their lives, they ran away from the Nazis, and they got to Shanghai, and it was 110 degrees, and he would not take off his hat and his jacket and his tie, because that is the image of a respected person, of a respectable person. This is how a Talmid Chacham holds himself. And it was so hot that he would get rashes on his skin from the heat of not taking off his jacket or his shirt. But Rav Yerucham managed through that time to maintain his dignity. You see, a lot of times we think of clothing as some form of expression, but actually the concept of clothing is one which allows someone to not be distracted by your soul's clothing and to pay attention to the soul. Let me be clear about what I mean by this. Imagine, as an example, if I was a person that was very, very, very wealthy. I have inherited hundreds of millions of dollars. Now I'm going to a singles event, and people looking at my gold Rolex, my fashionable shoes, and my suit, and my glasses, and they're thinking, oh gosh, this guy's a billionaire. I get all the attention from all the girls. But I'm at the end of the evening feeling like I have no idea if anyone actually gives two hoots about me. Could you imagine a person like that going back to the store to buy Converse sneakers and some $50 suit and coming to the event again and just looking to see who notices them? Could you imagine that? Imagine a very beautiful woman who gets all the eyes on her, but doesn't know if anyone is paying any attention to who she is as a human being, and they're only seeing her as a piece of meat. Could you imagine a woman feeling the need to not make herself ugly? That's not the point. But to not accentuate something that was distracting and detracting from people seeing the person that was underneath. The clothing that we wear, the covering up, the concept, and this is fascinating that there's a massive trend now towards people dressing in the office, not Jews, dressing very conservatively in the office because they want to be taken seriously. And they feel that unless they do so, people think that they're a whatever. Now, by the way, if you think that that's only for a woman, I just want you to imagine a guy who's magnificently looking, beautiful guy, very handsome, perfect chick. Imagine he walks into his office wearing a tight t-shirt and you could see the guy's also not going to be taken seriously. That's not a function of male or female. That's a function of what are you drawing attention to. So when God brought a neshama into this world, he also clothed the neshama in a guf, in a body. What clothing is to our body is to our souls. Therefore, Cleopatra, who was famous for being a beautiful person, what was she asking, Rev Meir, effectively? She was asking, is a person going to be brought back naked, or are they going to be brought back with clothing? In a post-Yetzer Hara world, does a body need to be clothed? Adam and Eve, prior to the introduction of the evil inclination, right? Prior to that point, were not clothed. And you know why they weren't clothed? Because without the evil inclination, there was no thought, nothing illicit, nothing inappropriate. There was nothing more inappropriate about a person's uncovered body than a person's uncovered nose. No one has ever said, you really should put some clothing on that nose. It's very distracting. Have some self-respect. Prior to the Yetzer Hara, it wasn't undignified. So Cleopatra was asking, what will happen in the end of days? How will we return? Said Rabbi Meir, if God chose to clothe even a seed, it is illustrative of the fact that this is something which is appropriate and kavod and a blessing for a human being. And therefore, in the final analysis, a person will also return not only with clothing on, but with their body, so to speak, to cover the neshama, to the guf, to the neshama. Now, why am I going down this entire, rabbit hole with you? I think what we're learning over here is something really special. Not only about the reviving of the dead in the end of time, but rather the dignity that there is in clothing. Rather, the understanding that the body is not something that a person needs to be neither ashamed of, but also to feel that it is inappropriate. I don't know if you know this. The origin of perfume goes back to the Christian church. I don't know if you know this. At the time, they forbid people to bathe because they said that when a person is left alone with their own body without clothing on it, they were predisposed to making, inappropriate decisions or having certain thoughts. So we'd rather you never bathed, you never took your clothes off. And to hide what was obviously the result of that choice was perfume. Fascinating. There's an earlier expression, by the way, of perfume that goes all the way back to the Roman gladiators. When there was death happening right in front of people's faces, the odor was overwhelming, and they would have giant receptacles of perfume to overpower the odor of death. That's maybe a slightly more macabre version of that perfume, but I'm sure it wasn't, designed for the same purpose, so therefore it didn't have the same clothing. But ultimately, what we're learning here is that when a person has a spiritual self, to protect that spiritual self, God gave us a body to cover that. And that is the perfect way for our soul to interact with the world. So without that clothing, we couldn't interact with the world properly. Is this making sense now? So what is a body? What is clothing? The ability for something to interact with something that it otherwise could not have interacted with. If people would get rid of clothing completely, or to a large extent, they are no longer capable of interacting on the highest level that they are capable of interacting with when we take the element of desire off of the table. Okay? That's what clothes is. That's what a body is. It allows us to interact with all the mitzvot of the world so that we can take physical experiences and translate them into spiritual ones. Yeah, hold on, let me just finish this thought because I don't want anyone to lose the thread. So if we make it practical, what we understand is that when I make a bracha on an apple, what am I doing? I'm having my soul communicate with the soul of this food. Is that fascinating? When I'm eating meat and I'm thinking to myself that I'm using this power, this energy I'm getting from this food to power me so that I can do and live a refined life, I'm taking the soul of that thing and elevating it to a level of spirituality it could never have achieved. I'm elevating a cow to the level of a human being. It's just unbelievable. That's what's happening. Now, if I'm just stuffing my face and I'm living like an animal, I haven't elevated it at all. I've degraded the cow. You can degrade an apple. Imagine the apple telling you, is that all you see? My shiny exterior? Eyes here, please. But that's what the whole world is like. Now that we understand this, we really have a fundamental grip on what we mean when we say that God sustains the whole world with kindness. And that He brings back life from death with tremendous mercy. And what is that mercy? If we are sustained by life, then what do we need to pay for that chesed with? Let me give you an example. I want you to imagine Siamese twins. One of them has 2 functioning kidneys and one of them has none. Slowly but surely, one of the Siamese twins is dying. At that point, imagine that the twin says to the doctor, I want you to take one of my kidneys and implant it in my sister. Now, they don't need to be twins in order for this mashal to work. But what do you say thank you for after you've received that kidney or liver? You don't say thank you for a kidney. You don't say thank you for a liver. You say thank you for a walk in the park. You say thank you for your daughter's birthday. You say thank you for being able to walk your son down the aisle at his wedding. All of life is now tracked back to that one act of chesed, of kindness, where someone gave you life. Imagine someone gave you a kidney and a liver and a heart and eyes and a nose and ears and toes. Or someone did. How much gratitude should I have for a donor who gave me all of my body parts? So what God did is He gave you the ability, every part of you. We mentioned in thinking about this idea, you should feel and experience that in every part of you. But it's not only that God gave us that brachamim. What's the price of God's kindness? We know that when God rewards or He punishes, He rewards or punishes through a lens of midah keneged midah, which means measure for measure. If you want kindness from God, what currency do you use to pay for that? Kindness. Kindness to whom? To someone else. Think how much kindness you have to expend if you're asking God to continue to give you kindness for every single part of your body. We need to be kind machines, right? Say the Chachamim, that's what we mean. When God brings us back from the dead, He doesn't bring us back fixed. He brings us back broken. And then He fixes us. Because it is when a person can understand how they are broken that they're able to look at another person who's broken with kindness and empathy and compassion. So God doesn't bring you back fixed. He brings you back broken for 1 second and then fixes you from your brokenness. So that you'll have the ability to be kind with those around you. So that you'll merit the kindness that you need for your own existence. Ladies, we have just unlocked God's everything of everything in His kindness. We are beginning to understand why, if God is giving me everything above everything, why would He give me this problem or this deficiency or this issue? And the answer is, because every challenge that you face allows you to give kindness to someone else from that space. When a person is coming back, so to speak, they are brought back broken and then healed. In my life, I experience my brokenness and then my healing. For what end? So that I could use that to be able to bring that kindness, that Bchesed that God is giving me, and to give it to someone else. And therefore, if that is the kindness, we start to realize some very, very beautiful truths. You see, there are things, when my neshama looks at it, it says this isn't perfect. But it is perfect for my goof, for my ability to interact with others. I needed this so that I could interface with, that is the function of the goof, to interface with somebody else. Maybe I'm brilliant. Maybe I have everything going for me. But unless I suffered in this way, would I be able to understand my wife or my children? I wouldn't. So the neshama looks at the world and says, this imperfection I don't understand. But the goof understands it. And then the goof looks at certain things in our world, physical problems, and says, I don't understand it. God, you give everything. Why are you giving me this problem, this deficiency, this sickness, this issue? And the goof doesn't understand it. But the neshama that is becoming compassionate, the neshama that is becoming humble, the neshama that is recognizing that it can't solve every problem by itself, understands that it is perfection for me. It is only when the neshama and the goof are united completely that they understand that everything that God gives, kol and kol, is chesed. When we think, therefore, of God bringing back with mercy those that are not alive, we said last week or 2 weeks ago, that a person can be not alive in many ways. They can be sick, they can be challenged, they can have lost the vitality of life. But the Talmud tells us that there's a few things that make a person not alive. A person who's lonely, says the Gemara, is not alive. And mitzorah is chashuv kemet. A person who's a sumah, who's blind, is considered like they're dead. Not only blind because they can't see. How many people can't see how beautiful their life is? So they walk around unable to see all the beauty that they have in their life, and they're only focusing on that area in which they are dead. So isn't someone who's blind to the gifts of life already dead? When you feel that God is capable of bringing those people back, think of someone you know that is alone. Think of someone that you know who doesn't have a relationship in their life that makes it all worth it. The Gemara says a person who's missing children. Children over here can mean actual physical children, or it can mean purpose or achievements. A person who's missing either one of those is also a person who already feels like they're not living, they're not alive. God can use His mercy, and we have to ask Him for it, to be able to bring a person like that back. And if we feel that, then what do we know we need to do? If what we need is chesed, we use our chesed receptor in giving it chesed to others. If we need mercy from Hashem, then we use our mercy receptor and give mercy to others. So my friends, Although the neshama is the higher of the two, it is who we really are. It is what gives us purpose. It is what gives us our individuality, our consciousness, that which differentiates us from everybody else, that makes us not just a piece of meat. When a neshama dies, says the Ramak, in heaven, it prays to be reunited with its guf, with its body. And why is that? Because as a soul, we are static beings like angels, maybe very holy, but like angels. We can't make any choices. We can't earn any reward. We can't get any closer to God. The neshama mourns all the opportunities it left behind in this world. The Vilna Gaon, before he dies, is crying, and they ask him, why aren't you going directly to Gan Eden? He says, yes, but in this world for a couple of pennies I could wear tzitzit and fulfill my mitzvah. In just a few moments, I'll never be able to fulfill a mitzvah ever again. And he cried for the lost opportunity. Our souls, after we die, will cry for the lost opportunities that they had, that they would have had to be able to do more. Foolish people think of this only in their last moments, in their moments of death. Smart people allow that thought to be a governing principle in their life. Ask yourself, right now, what I am doing, will my neshama mourn its chance to do this? Will forever me miss this? And if it won't, maybe you need to stop doing what you're doing and do something else. When a person lives life that way, then they are using every minute that they have in this beautiful, glorious goof, in this clothing, in this interface with the world, with other human beings, with the chance to be become great, and to rectify and to elevate the neshama. We have a finite amount of time in this car. I don't know if any of you has ever not had a car. And then you waited until you had a bunch of things that you needed to do, all your errands, and then you rented a car. Anyone remember a day like that? Now what do? You have a long list of things. I have the car for today. I'm gonna go tovel the dishes. I'm gonna go deliver these food packages. I'm gonna empty out my house and bring the extra clothes to the Bikur Cholim. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna go there, I'm gonna visit my parents. You cram everything that you can into the day because I only have the car for today, and this is the vehicle, ladies, that we only have for today. What are we doing while we have the car? Sitting around, wasting time? You'll have plenty of time for that when you're dead. In fact, that's all you'll have. So when we think to ourselves, God, you're so kind to give me more life, more days, more energy, more strength, more heart, more compassion, more ideas. Mechayeh metim brachamim rabim. I have a feeling that when you revive me, it's going to be with a lot of mercy. I hope I will have done enough things by my own metric, to be able to have earned, the ability to come back. Is this what my neshama would want me to come back to earth in order to do? Hashem should bless us, Be'ezrat Hashem, to always feel God's strength flowing through our veins. I want to do one last experience with you. And watch this, just do this with me. Take your hands and make them into a fist, close them. And just as your hands close, say, Hashem's Chesed. Open your hands and say, Hashem's Chesed. Move your toes and your feet and say, Hashem's Chesed. Shrug your shoulders. Think a thought and say, Hashem's Chesed. Feel a feeling and think Hashem's Chesed. This is the glory that we are giving to God with these words. Recognizing as well that no matter how far we've strayed, God with great mercy also brings us back to life, gives us a second chance at being able to get these things right. Thank you so much, Rabotai, for listening.